Hi and welcome back to part two of the Waypoint database tutorial. So as we discussed at the end of the last part of the tutorial, what we're going to do now is add a list of all the locations that the person or the user has saved. So let's get cracking straight away and create that list view that we're going to add. So we're going to add a new file, and it's going to be a UI view controller subclass. You can see here that subclass is pre-selected as UI table view controller. That's not going to be the default type when you bring this up, but because I've already done this as a draft, that's pre-filled in for me. And we're going to call this a location table view controller. And we're going to do it all in code, so we don't need a zip file. So now we have that our class files added in there. Let's start straight away by bringing that, having that show us something and get the user interface working. So if you look down towards the bottom, you'll see a few methods that that you need to create straight away. A table view has a concept of a data source. The data source is basically providing the view, basically the graphical interface, with the information that it needs to populate the list. So when the list is created, it goes straight to the data source object, which in this case happens to be the view controller, and says how many sections are there in my list. We're not going to use sections, so we're just going to say 1. Then it's going to say how many rows are there, how many items are there in my list. Just for the sake of having something in the view, let's say that there's going to be 5. And then it's going to start one by one for each item in the list, or for each cell on the user interface. It's going to call this method table view cell for row at index path. The index path is a type of object that in this case will give you what section are we looking at and what row inside that section are we looking at. So given the row and section, what should I draw on the screen? In order to manage memory better, it has a concept of reusable cells. So what we do is we say, what is a string that uniquely identifies this type of item in my list? We'll just use the word cell. And then we can say to the table view object, are there any reusable cells in your bank at the moment? Which is basically would be any cells that have scrolled off the screen. So if they're not on the screen anymore, we may as well just reconfigure the existing cell rather than building up a whole new cell and doing all the memory allocation and all that sort of stuff. So if there isn't, we're going to get nil back, so there isn't a cell to use. We go ahead and create a new cell, and we initialize it with a style. I recommend that you go and look at Apple's documentation on programming table views, and it will describe the types of built-in styles that you can use. You should feel free to completely redesign these and make your own table view if you want. In this case, there is a type called let me look at my notes. Actually we can just use code completion. Style value 1 is the one that we're going to use. We pass in the reuse identifier so that we can use it later. And what we will do, just so that we can see it on the screen, is we can say cell.text label.text equals, and we'll say description's going to go here. And the reason we chose value 1 is that it has this object called text label, detail text label, which is where we're going to put the location. And we'll put the location there. So now we've basically done all that we need to have a functioning table view. Now we need to get that onto the screen. So we'll go over to our show method. Sorry if you can hear my dogs barking in the background. And we'll import the location view. Also import the application delegate. This is something I did earlier when I was playing with this, and you will need to type this line here as well. So when we hit the show button, we're going to want to create a location table view controller. So let's go ahead and do that. And notice that it brings up init with style rather than init. Because this is a table view controller, we should use the init with style method, initialization method instead, and just initialize it to style plain. Now we have our view controller created. We need to push it onto our navigation controller that we created at the end of the last tutorial. So we need to get our hands on that navigation controller. And that's why we needed to import the application delegate above. Let's get our hands on the application delegate so that we can get the navigation controller that it owns. And we do that by saying UI application. Remember, it's the delegate against the application, so we'll get the application first, and then we get the delegate that's contained within it. Now, all we need to do is say to the app delegate, we want your navigation controller, and we want to push our new location table view controller onto the navigation controller. And yes, we want that to be animated. And that's it. If we run this, sorry, I just hit Command R to run it. We have our location, and if we show, here is our table view that we just created with 5 fields, because we said that we wanted 5 rows in our table view, and each one has been configured with description goes here and location goes here. There we are, and we can scroll backwards and forwards using our navigation controller. So that's nice. It shows you the navigation, the table view, but it's not actually doing what we want yet. So let's start building towards that. Now let's have a think about how we're going to structure our data, because we want to save these locations into a list and then show them on the screen. And we need that list to be preserved even after the list disappears off the screen. So the first thing I think we're going to need to do is have an array to save our data into. And we'll use a mutable array because that's easier for our to add extra items onto our list. So that's going to be our main data structure, and we need to create that array now. Now I'm going to just paste in some code here. that I wrote earlier so that you don't have to watch me type it. But I'll walk you through what it does. Oh, I've actually made a typo there. This should be called saved locations. And this, what I've just pasted in here, is all the code that we need to save this array and load it back from disk every time it goes on and off the screen. You notice that we've got an error there at the moment. It's because I need to provide the file name that we're going to save. This first method here, file name, is a snippet that I keep around because I use it all the time. And what this does is asks the iOS system, using this function here, please go and find me the document directory. Actually, we might change that to be library directory for this user and this application, and it's going to return an array of all the candidates that it thinks that you might be looking for. In this case, it's only going to return one object. So we take the first object off that array and save it inside this string. Then what we do is we use the built-in string method append path component, use this file name that we've just defined, and sorry, as I said, this is a snippet that I reuse all the time, and I had written it in a non-ARC compatible automatic reference counting format, which is why we had that error there. Now we have a convenience method that I've created, which basically goes away and says, create me a file manager object. Again, this is part of the foundation library. Use this method above to get me the file name, and then it goes and asks the system, does this file already exist? Have we done this before? If it does, we use the array with contents of file method that's built into NSMutableArray and NSArray to load that file off the iPhone's hard drive and make that the saved locations array. If we haven't saved an array before, then this file exists at path method will return no, and we create a brand new array. Lastly, the method save to file is basically doing it's just a shortcut to say get the file name and then use the saved locations array, call the write to file method that's built into NSMutableArray and NSArray, and save my array out to the file name, and atomically means do this in a thread safe manner. If this method fails, if it returns no, that means that the write didn't work, we log an error. If it returns yes, then it worked, and we just keep going. So what we basically are doing now is saying that when we call init with style, when our object is initialized, we want to load any array that we may have saved previously back in and use it. And likewise, when we're finished with our view, we want to make sure we save any changes. So when our view is going to disappear, we'll have this method here called, and we'll just say save to file. So now we have our array loading and saving, but we don't have anything in the array. So let's add a mechanism to add new locations into our array, and we're going to need core location because we're going to use one of the methods, one of the data structures from core location, and we'll say add location, and that's going to be a CL location object with description, and that's going to be an NS string. So we'll add this method in here now. Now we can't just put anything we want into the array, because we're relying on this write to file method to work as a easy way of saving our array object out. So what we're going to do is, because we need multiple data items saved into each row of our, or each index of our array, being that we want the locations longitude and latitude and the description, we'll pack all of that information into an NS dictionary, which is a key value storage mechanism. And we'll just call this info, and we'll use the convenience method NS dictionary with objects and keys. So the first item we want saved into our dictionary is the latitude, let's say, and that is found inside location dot coordinate dot latitude, and we're going to call that latitude. Now I'm about to make a mistake there. Latitude is a floating point number, which would cause this write to file method to not to work, because it isn't what's called a plist compliant data format. But what we do have is an object called NSNumber, which is a plist type of object. So if we say number with float and put the latitude number in there, suddenly that's going to work. So that's what we're going to do. It means a little tiny bit more programming, but in terms of making the save process easier, it's well worth it. Now we'll just cut and paste that, and we'll put the longitude into the next object. And lastly, we're going to save the description and call that description. And to finish our list off, we need to use nil, or that's going to crash. That basically says this is the end of my list of objects and keys. Now all we need to do is say to our saved locations, add object, and we'll push our dictionary object onto the array, and we're done. We now have a way to add new locations onto our locations database. So what we can do over here in our view controller now is that we can take this code here, put it under our save button as well, and say that when we hit the save button, what we want to be doing is add a new location, which is our current location, using our current description. Now what I just did there again is, sorry, I used something that I coded earlier that I meant to delete. What I did is create this new line. This is within John's code from the first part of this tutorial. I added a current location object called of type CL location, and going back down in John's GPS code down here, I made a copy of the location object and put it into the current location field. So I apologize that I should have taken that out and showed you that I actually wrote that line in. If you follow along with me, that you will need to go and do that now. So again, make a CL location, a current location object of type CL location, and down in the GPS updating code type current location equals new bracket new location copy in bracket, which duplicates the new location object and saves it in a object called current location. It's important that you take a copy, because this new location field may well disappear, be released by the GPS manager inside the iOS. So now we have, going back to here, now we have a way of telling our view controller that we're adding a new location into its database. That's good. So now we've got, just reviewing, we've got a location database that's being loaded from file every time this comes up. It's being saved to file every time the view disappears, and we have a way to add new objects into it. So now all we need is a way of getting those objects onto the screen. Well, now instead of having 5 rows every time, we need to have the number of rows that there are items in our database or array, and we can just say that, return that by saying saved locations count. So that's the number of saved locations that we have. The last thing we need to do is actually use the information that we saved. So what we need to do is pull that information out of our database or array, and the way we do that is to say that we want the dictionary back that we saved inside the array, and we get that by saying saved location object at index. And remember, I told you earlier that this index path contains the section of the table that we're in, which is always going to be the first section, and what row we are currently talking about. So in this case we say that we want index path dot row. That's which item in the list we're currently looking at. And then what we need to do is unpack the information out of the dictionary structure. So what we'll have is a float, which is our latitude. Let's see if I can actually type the word latitude this time, which is going to be info object for key, and we named this key latitude, and we saved it as a number, so we need to unpack it out of that NS number structure, which we do just by saying float value. And we'll unpack the longitude by using pretty much the same code. All we need to do is change this to longitude. And lastly, we have in that dictionary we have a description, which is saved in our info dictionary, and we named that So now all we need to do is put that information into our cell. So the description text becomes the actual description text, and our longitude and latitude will become a formatted NS string. We'll use string with format, and we'll use the encoding format of saying we want 2 0 padded numbers after the decimal point for each item, and we're putting into the string the longitude and latitude. So that was a lot of coding. Hopefully that compiles now. It succeeds. So we'll run it and we'll get to see this again. Hi, sorry, back again. My dogs went absolutely crazy, so I had to pause the recording and go and sort them out. Hopefully they stay quiet. So where we left off, we were just about to run the application. I promise I have not added added or edited any code here. So what we're able to do now is give ourselves a description of the location where we are and say save. And now we have our first item in the list. We can go away. That saves in the background, and we can give ourselves the next location where we are, save that, and it loads the home item off the hard drive, adds another item to the list. We hit back, it saves again. We can add another location, hit save, it loads home and circus from our saved file, adds the word work to the end of the list, and so on and so forth. We can hit show, and it just loads that process again. So that was a lot of code, but I felt like I needed to show you what it looks like to use a table view in real life. Adding and removing items. Well, we aren't removing items yet. That could potentially be the next tutorial, because table views do have a built-in way of manipulating what you see on screen and removing items from lists and so on. So that might be the next thing to do. But I hope that was of value to you. Let's see, what have we learned today? We've learned how to save files, array files, out to hard drive, the iPhone's hard drive, using the proper method for getting the locations where you're allowed to save. And we've learned about table views, and that most importantly the data source view of the way table views work. So yeah, these are the three items here that you need to remember: number of sections, number of rows, and most importantly cell for row at index path. And that each time cell for a table view wants to draw one item in the list, it calls cell for row at index path, and it's your job to configure the cell based on the row number that it gives you. I hope that was of use to you. I hope it all made sense. Please do give me feedback, give me any ideas you have for what the next tutorial should be, and I'll get to work on it. Thanks for your time.